All right. So everybody, thank you for joining today. Um, this study we've been working on with our grant from DEEP for a while, as you all know. In when we ask you to join us in meetings, interviews, workshops, town profiles, surveys, site visits, and meeting with other waste authorities, we've been busy. We've been through all sorts of different scenarios and learning a lot about the region and what waste is doing. Um, RiverCog is working with RRS and HDR, our two consultants, and are now ready to make recommendations by presenting different scenarios. So today we'll be learning about the different scenarios. Please ask questions. During the COG meeting on June 24th, we'll be asking the COG board to vote which scenario they are selecting. So we have between now and the end of June to get all your questions and answer. Usually, typically me, after the meeting, I have more questions. So if you do, go on to the RiverCog website and we will be recording this presentation. And we also have a QR code that you can fill out to on forms to ask questions. So the different waste programs that could be offered, the different programs like plastic film or composting, for example, are part of the second half of the DEEP grant, if you choose to go there. We're not there yet. We're now looking at what's the best way to organize so that more regional waste programs and arrangements can be offered in the future. Also, nothing that we're doing today will preclude what will be happening at the Essex transfer station. That's another waste matter and will be a part of the second half of the DEEP grant. So with the help of our consultants, RRS and HDR, we have the presentation. Kristen, take it away.
Thanks, Janice. Yeah, I'm Kristen Wieland. I work for a company called RRS. It stands for Resource Recycling Systems. And that name speaks to kind of what you're all trying to evaluate right now, which is what do you want your system, your waste system to look like, and what is going to best serve you for the years to come. So I'm joined by my colleague Jessica, who works for a different consulting firm called HDR. They do work across the country as well, and they have a unique perspective on things as well. So we're actually teaming up together to work on this project for you all and bring the strengths of both of those consulting firms together to present you with some recommendations. So Jessica's on the line too, and we'll be able to answer questions that are specific to the parts of the work that HDR has worked on. So today our goal is to walk you through where we've been, what we've done to get to this point, and then ultimately we will present you with our preliminary recommendation that we'd like to get your feedback on. So at the end, we're hoping that there will be plenty of time for questions and discussion and perspectives that you all have on the recommendation that we've put forward, as well as ones that maybe we haven't thought about or put forward for a recommendation. So again, I'll just underscore what Janice said that this is a dynamic system that you're all working in, this is a snapshot in time. The decision to advance the potential for a regional waste authority doesn't preclude any of the things that you're doing right now from happening. So don't think that those are competing. Ideally, they would be in alignment going forward. And so contracting and operations and equipment procurement can advance just as they would without this regional waste authority conversation going on. This is a future. What we're talking about today is something that will hopefully support you in the future. So the scenarios that we have evaluated, and really we started this work with RiverCog in July of last year. So we've been at this for some months, and we've talked to many of you or your staff throughout that time frame. And what we've been evaluating, which we may not have been specific about what we've been evaluating when we talk to you, but there are some specific scenarios that Deep has asked RiverCog to evaluate, and so that's what we're going to talk about today. So from a scenario standpoint, there are actually four, but one of them is a branching decision. So the first scenario that Deep asked us to evaluate is should RiverCog or should the towns within RiverCog continue with just individual initiatives? And this really is what you're doing today for the most part. Some of you are working together either formally or informally for equipment sharing or operating transfer stations. In some cases, you're contracting together. And we know the dynamics of that right now. But individual initiatives really would be status quo. That's a decision that we'll put forward to you to just continue on status quo. Um, the next scenario is a semi-regionalization, which is really like a smaller grouping of towns working together, either formally or informally. In some cases, like Durham Middlefield, this is already happening. It's not happening across the entire region, though. And then the next scenario is the development or joining of an authority. So the idea of an authority is not new in Connecticut. There are a couple of existing authorities that we've evaluated the potential for RiverCog, either towns individually or as a collective, to join. We'll talk about that scenario. And then alternatively, one of the scenarios that Deep would actually provide funding for would be for you to stand up your own authority that serves your unique needs. So we'll talk about all of those in more detail, but because some of those are new concepts and they're a little squishy as far as what they actually mean, we've sort of stripped it down and applied an analogy here. So the individual initiatives, if we look at it in a vehicle kind of comparison, individual initiatives really are each town having its own car. You can personalize your car. You can have it be a Cadillac, or you can have it be a Yugo, for those of you who are familiar with Yugos. So it can be as complicated, as sophisticated, and as complex as you want it to be. It can be a hybrid. It can be a full electric, full gas. You're all owning sort of the complexity of your car. And in this case, it would be your waste system. In the semi-regionalization model, we're sort of thinking about those as passenger vans where one person's driving, but there's a bunch of passengers that can get on board and you're all kind of going in the same direction. Passenger vans are good for some things, but they also have some limitations. And so we'll talk about those. And then the authority in this analogy really is a truck that's hauling all the vehicles. So there can be a lot of different vehicles on the truck. You can have individual vehicles that are the Cadillac and are the Yugo, and then you can also have the passenger vans on that truck, but they're all kind of aligning and going in the same direction with uniquenesses within each of the vehicles or each of the towns. So hopefully that sort of helps you frame the discussion that we're going to have this morning. There are a couple of assumptions that we want to make, though. Um, RiverCog as an organization could be involved in any of the scenarios that RiverCog could support individual initiatives. They could support semi-regionalization, and then they could support an authority, either joining or building a new one. That's up to you all to determine, and of course RiverCog to determine what their role is, what their limitations are, and what the cost would be for RiverCog to be involved in any of those going forward. And then one of the things that we heard in the workshops was a concern about getting having behavior change be a component of the development of a regionalized system or a full authority system. So I just want to underscore that any of the initiatives that you all decide to move forward with in a regionalized way, whether it's formal or informal, could be highly visible to the public. So it could be something that you're actually jointly presenting to the members of your community, or it could be completely behind the scenes, back of house, if you will, where it's just purely administrative, and the general public doesn't even know that you are working together. So the regionalized kind of concept or the authority concept does not have to be public facing. And so you don't have to assume that there will be a lot of behavior change as part of that. So
Can
let's,
I ask questions now?
if it's, I think it's probably best to hold them till the end unless it's a burning, like about this slide
I will
question.
wait. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, great. All right, so we'll move on and we'll talk about some of these in detail. So, many of you participated in our workshops. We had interviews with you. Some of you we met with you and your staff at your facilities, at your transfer stations. While what Janice said is that is true, our intent here for this project is not to define the programs and services that will be put forth in a regionalized way, but to really highlight the ones that you all think could be suitable to advance to an authority or to a regionalized approach in some capacity. So throughout those engagements that we've had since last fall, the ones that sort of rose to the top that we would suggest that you consider regionalizing in some way are listed here on the screen. So, administration and compliance is one that really was universally conveyed as a significant burden of time, resources, staff on individual towns. So it could be reporting to the state, it could be ensuring compliance, it could be actually advocating, excuse me, advocating for programs or services or policy at the state level or the national level, doing research into new technologies and markets. And then education is such a significant component of the success of any materials recovery program. So collectively, administration and compliance could be something that you advance to a regionalized approach to be able to gain efficiencies and collectively work towards a more efficient way to administer and comply with the variety of things that you have to comply with. The second concept that we would recommend that you consider advancing is hauling and disposal contracting. So this could be curbside collection, or it could be at your processing facilities, like at your transfer stations, and doing joint contracting to be able to achieve a scale that would get you beneficial pricing and potentially more services for a lesser price. So this could be waste and recycling. It could be hauling or processing or disposal, but really sort of the idea of the MIRA contract. There's a reason why that was brought forward so many years ago because there's a cost effectiveness in scaling and getting more tons to make available. So that's another one that could be a regionalized approach going forward. There were moving on to the next one, there are some material specific pilots and programs that were universally or almost universally of interest or were expressed as challenges that many of you have already tried, but run into some barriers. So plastic film collection, like wrap over toilet paper, that kind of plastic film, plastic grocery bags. It could even be commercial film. So that's a material many of you have tried to collect and individually have somewhat struggled because of markets or space to collect. So plastic film is one material. Cardboard is another one that is in significant volume in the waste stream today for a lot of different reasons, but distinct cardboard collection could be valuable. Foam, and this would be expanded polystyrene or otherwise known as styrofoam collection. There is equipment and there are markets for foam, but as you know, it's very lightweight and you have to collect a lot of it in order to make a full truckload. So working together, you could actually experience some scale that would bring you some value to work together and collect that material. And then there are other specialty materials as well that rose to the top. And then organics collection, processing, and sorting. So this could include food scraps, it could include yard waste, woody debris. Many of you expressed that you're already working on that, but knowing what's happening at the state level, there could be we do expect there to be some increased attention and requirements for food scrap collection at the local level. Yard waste, of course, is a seasonal material, but takes up a lot of space and can occupy a lot of your staff's time. And then woody debris in storm events or just seasonally can also take up a lot of space and time for individual programs. So again, RiverCog could be involved in any of those specific program or service areas. And any of them could be public facing, like very highly visible, or they could be behind the scenes as you work together to solve operational kind of logistics things on a day-to-day basis. All right, so we'll talk about the individual scenarios that Deep asked RiverCog to evaluate. And because I just laid out a whole bunch of programs and services that are kind of gnarly on their own and a little wicked, we're just going to focus on how the individual initiatives, if you decided that you just want to keep kind of status quo in an individual management basis, how that would look for disposal contracting. So we're just using disposal contracting as the example in these scenarios. So in an individual scenario, individual initiative scenario, services, programs, operation of your transfer stations, all of that are really planned, procured, and managed at your individual town level, as you're doing right now in most cases. You would have independent contracting and program management. The administrative responsibilities are really distributed across all the towns, so you're all administering your own programs in unique ways. And then there's relatively inconsistent coordination if it's happening across town kind of town boundaries. So in the disposal contracting example, this would be each town individually contracting either for collection or for processing at your transfer station of the waste that's coming out of that transfer station. You all would have continue to have individual contracts with haulers or processors. You would have limited aggregation of demand across the communities, so you're not getting that efficiency of scale that would sort of draw attention and lower the price of your service. And then the contract terms, pricing, and timelines are going to vary. So it would be status quo going forward. So these are those individual cars, different varieties, different sizes, different costs, but all of them kind of going in all different directions. So in the semi-regionalization approach, this would be a more coordinated initiative across multiple communities. So the way that we will be presenting this in the final report that we are preparing right now, that you'll have before the vote in June, the way that we're preparing this is that two or three towns would formally or potentially informally work together on select initiatives. So again, this would be an example, it's very similar to what Durham and Middlefield are doing with the operation of their transfer station, but it would be sort of replicated across the entire region in a fairly organized way. It would be aligned by geography in most cases because your geographic proximity is an asset to you in this type of scenario. And it would be based on existing relationships. So we know that many of you are part of joint school districts. Some of you are planning together in other regards, like a climate plan or like a watershed kind of plan. So there are other ways that you're already working together. So this would be building upon those existing relationships. You would begin to see some efficiencies and some cost savings, and this may or may not be a formal structure that you would have to decide on what that relationship is, and it would probably require an interlocal agreement to establish that working relationship and the understanding of roles, responsibilities, costs, and all of those things. So in the disposal contracting scenario, those two or three towns could evaluate whether or not they want to work together to actually jointly contract out for hauling or disposal contracts for waste, recycling, food waste, any of the materials that are generated. There would be some coordination across the participating towns, and you would begin to see some cost savings because of the aggregation of tons that you're all pooling together in that joint contract. So this is going back to our analogy. This is really that van passenger van approach. So again, in a semi-regionalized approach, there typically is one driver. So one of the towns is just naturally going to be leading that initiative. Again, you could pull in RiverCog in some capacity, but that would again be another relationship you would have to specify and establish. So th this is that passenger van where one person's driving, a bunch of passengers are on board. You're all generally going in the same direction, but it's the amount of seats on a passenger van are pretty limited. So there's not a lot of capacity, and there's really no centralized organizer of these semi-regionalized partnerships. And then finally, the authority scenario. So this is the most centralized coordination, and in a good authority, there will be representative governance. So in our analogy, this is that truck that's kind of has room to carry all the cars. And all the number of cars that this truck can carry are defined by the organizing documents, the formation documents, and the governance uh, rules. So the services are coordinated through a centralized entity. There should be shared governance across all the participating communities, which would become members. And in this authority scenario, there really is maximum impact and the lowest cost because of the scale that you're able to achieve in the best case scenario for an authority. It can be highly visible or completely invisible to the public. And there's centralized leadership with representative governance. Despite the term authority sounds very sort of stiff, but an authority really should be highly flexible so that it's best serving the members, so that there's a reason for the members to stay members. If they're not being served very well by the authority, then the authority is not doing its job. So it should be highly flexible to be able to pivot if need be, if the need arises to meet the needs of the membership. So in the disposal contracting scenario, the RWA would actually, as that convener, the RWA would coordinate the waste to recycling, hauling, and disposal contracts. And again, in the most flexible scenario, it would be an opt-in. So again, this is based on your formation documents, but you're not going to want to be forced into a contract that you don't see benefit from. So in the best case scenario, this would be an opt-in contract, so that if you see benefit of joining together with the other members of the authority in a contract, you can opt into that, and it can request for proposals or contract negotiations can move forward with your tons and your town represented in that discussion. This represents aggregated demand across the participating communities, the members, and there would be centralized procurement and contract management. So this is highly structured and formal governance. There should be no question about what you're getting from your services and who is leading in this scenario. So the authority in the work that we're doing begins to split because there are two different scenarios that Deep wanted us to evaluate for you. Um, the first example is join an existing authority. Some of you may have participated in the lunch and learns or the meetings that RiverCog hosted with both SCARA and CSWA. These are the two regional authorities that exist in the state of Connecticut already. They're very different organizations, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. They're two very different organizations, but both are adjacent to RiverCog. From a proximity standpoint, these are the two that would make the most sense for you to evaluate joining if it becomes available to you. So again, in an authority, you're going to have the maximum impact and the lowest cost due to the scale. But in both of these scenarios, they would have a limited ability to have you actually join the governing body of the organization. And at this point, it's unclear what the membership benefits would be to you. So we'll talk about those here in just a second. So SCARA is on to the east of RiverCog. It has a full-time executive director that is running the authority. And at this point, the board of directors for SCARA has not decided whether or not they are interested in having new members join SCARA. They are internally evaluating that, and they're open to it, but they don't know what it would look like quite yet. So currently, Dave, the executive director, has been asked to evaluate a two-tiered membership structure because there are a lot of existing members who have sort of paid in and have supported the organization. There are some benefits that they would probably receive going forward that new members, like any of the towns in Rivercog, would likely not receive. And one of those services that is a significant benefit to existing members is subsidized pricing for disposal because they've made some financial and planning decisions in the past. The SCARA is able to subsidize the pricing that their members get for disposal at the contracted facilities. Going forward, they've indicated that Rivercog towns, should they be able to join, would not receive that subsidized pricing. In addition, future members of SCARA would probably have a limited membership access, and it would be limited to just the disposal contract, not the other suite of services that SCARA offers its current members, like HHW programming and other contracting kind of programs. In addition, they are building a composting operation. They're in at the start of that right now. They're willing to entertain the idea of additional members joining in and getting access to that compost operations, but that decision is a few years out because they're just now building it. It's also important to note that SCARA coordinates disposal only. They're not doing any collection in the towns, so they are managing the processing and disposal contracts, not the actual curbside collection of the waste. They negotiate 10-year contracts, and those contracts are expiring in 2030. So they're starting the negotiation for their new contracts right now. So if they decided that they were open to new members, now would be a fairly complicated time to join because they're already in those contract negotiations. So that would be an open question whether or not you could actually join that contract, or if you would need to add on after they've already signed it. Going over to the other side in a very different authority model, CSWA is to the north of you. Cromwell is actually already a member of CSWA because they're directly adjacent to CSWA. So this authority is run by a staff member of CROG, of the regional planning authority to the north of you. Based on the current business model that they have, the organizational model, they believe they're limited to about 25 members under the current model, and they already have 14, including Cromwell. So there's limited availability to add new members in that authority model based on the current operating system. The membership that they've established is based on town population. And we know that most of the towns in Rivercog, should they decide to join CSWA, the membership cost would be relatively low, $1,000 or less in most cases. So it's not a significant cost to join. But there are also some considerations. So there are currently no executive committee seats, which would mean that you don't have representation on the executive committee where they're making some significant decisions. It's also a pretty limited number of seats that they have, which are open for annual election. So you're not guaranteed a position on the executive committee. Currently, their operating costs are funded through grants and dues, though they're really not relying on dues for most of the programs that they're operating. They are currently not coordinating any contracts, though they do intend to in the future. They're sort of waiting for the existing contracts to expire. But currently they're not managing any of those contracts, and they don't own infrastructure, which is different than SCARA. So SCARA actually owns infrastructure and has made significant investments in that. CSWA is sort of a lighter, a sort of entry level, growing authority, whereas SCARA is a pretty advanced and long-standing one. So these very different models that you have available within geographic proximity. And then finally, the authority, still sticking with the authority scenario, but building your own authority from the ground up. This is the example that's going to give you the maximum amount of flexibility. This first bullet here says that you can have as few as 2 towns or as many as the formation documents allow. But if you just have two towns, you're going to be limited to the benefit that you're getting from just those two towns. So the more towns that join, that's really where you're going to see the maximum cost savings because you have those economies of scale. You're going to have the maximum impact in this scenario as your membership grows. But the nice part about creating your own authority is that you can grow it at the pace that the members desire. You could jump in both feet, all of you could join both feet, in and really start with a lot of different programs and services if that's what the membership desires. You could start slow and sort of build up that trust and the understanding of what the authority can do for you, and grow at the pace that you want it to grow. There can be as many programs, services, and functions as the members desire. It's also important to note that you're not precluded from working with other authorities. So authorities can work with other authorities, either formally or informally. So there is the potential that if you stand up a new authority, you could work with SCARA and sort of ride on the contract that they are signing with their processing and disposal facilities. So they can coexist and work together. So the nice part about the authority, about creating your new authority, would be that you can have individual initiatives and semi-regionalized initiatives concurrently while you're in an authority. So you don't everything does not have to be managed by the authority. You can still run your own transfer station. You can still own your own equipment, but you would be joining the authority to get the benefits that you see as most valuable that authority is providing to you. It's important to know that DEEP has already committed funding for the establishment of a new authority. None of the other initiatives or scenarios that I spoke to previously would have any additional funding to come alongside of them. So it would be incumbent upon you all to figure out how to continue to work individually, or how to group yourselves together into those subregions in order to do the things that you want to do. The sort of the negative part of creating your own authority is that it does take some time to stand it up and to realize the value of it. So we're estimating it would take 12 to 18 months to be really fully established and rolling out programs and services, because there are a lot of details that need to be worked out to make sure that it's functioning the way that the members in the best way to serve the members, and that all of the establishment of that authority is clean and tight, so that you can have a successful launch and a long-term success as well. So the recommendation that we're preparing, unless we hear significant pushback or different perspectives from you all at this point in the project, is to move forward with the development of a new regional waste authority. There's no cost impact to any of you because that funding has already been committed by DEEP. Um, we're recommending that instead of hiring an executive director and really kind of taking a big step, we're suggesting that you kind of approach this as a crawl, walk, run kind of approach. So we're suggesting that the initial leadership of the authority and building up the authority be led by RiverCog, but that they bring in additional contracted legal and technical expertise to support the really thoughtful and well-designed implementation of the authority. And we suggest that you start again that crawl, walk, run kind of approach. Pick one or two initiatives that you want to sort of feel out and flex your muscles a bit in an authority scenario, to be able to understand what it can do for you, and then grow it at the pace that the membership desires. So the RWA again would be that central coordinator supporting and connecting efforts across the region. It should support the members in the way that the members need support. It shouldn't be forcing anything that people don't want. So again, this one has funding, and so this in that analogy, this really is that flatbed truck where all of your cars and passenger vans can jump on that flatbed truck. But if there's something that you don't want to do under the authority umbrella, you don't have to do it. It should be an opt-in, opt-out kind of model. So you're probably thinking about, okay, what would this mean for my town? Where could this go wrong? So we don't want to ignore those. We want to sort of get those out here and talk about them. So I think we've covered a lot of the potential benefits. So there would be lower costs from a greater scale. You would have increased bargaining power, collective advocacy, so that if there's something that's urgently needed to bring to the state level or to the national level, the authority could actually be that advocate for you, representing your voice at the state or national level. You can have shared problem solving and then share the successes that you're individually having as well. You can share the cost burden, and then you're mitigating risk because you're collectively kind of approaching some of these scenarios together. So some of the examples that we could actually apply based on what we heard from you in the workshops and interviews would be really an extension of the HHW program that you're already part of through RiverCog. So the HHW program might be a logical program for you to bring under the umbrella of an authority, bring you all together for that joint decision making, joint contracting, and shared cost, and then build it out from there. So some of the other examples that you could consider to build out under the authority would be jointly owning a grinder for wood. We saw that many of you are struggling with woody debris seasonally or in some cases all year long. So you could have a shared grinder or chipper that you are distributing across the region on an as-needed basis, and that authority really is setting the expectations and the scheduling for where that grinder would be. Maybe it's more than one grinder. We don't know yet. An densifier for expanded polystyrene foam. So that styrofoam, you don't all need a densifier at a cost of fifty to $90,000 each. So if we could distribute a few densifiers across the region where you can all get the benefit of using that densifier, that would be a great way to cost share, but all get the benefit of that. Again, joint contracting and collection, we've talked about advocacy at the state and national level for funding or policies or just general support. And then regional composting, I think that it is likely, and we'll cost model this out in the report, but a regional composting site, similar to what SCARA is doing, could be in the long term, could be something that you all want to actually invest in so that you can get the benefit of, so you don't have to continue to send your material out of the region at significant cost. So the potential concerns that you're probably sort of spinning in your minds are you're feeling like you could be losing control. You want to make sure that there's governance and that your town is represented and that you're getting what you need out of this group. You're probably thinking about voting power. How are the formulas calculated to make sure that you're not paying more than you should for the services that you're getting? If you decide to join an authority and it goes in a direction that you don't want it to go and that you don't want to be part of it anymore, how do you get out of it? What are the existing contracts and what would be the assets that you're buying into? And then how do you ensure that you're getting quality service out of the contract that you might be buying into? So we don't have solutions for all of those things yet, but those are very common thoughts that many of you are probably having in your heads. And that really is the next step of this project. So we don't want you to sort of get hung up on those details, though they are very, very important and they are legitimate details that need to be worked out. So as we think about June 24th, in the vote that will be brought before the RiverCog board, what you will be voting on is whether to advance the RWA to really think about those legal and technical frameworks that are going to give you a level of comfort knowing that if you joined this RWA, you would be represented. It would be equitable financial expectations that you would have a seat at the table in the decision making, that the bylaws are representative of you and your town, and really that the governance structure meets the needs of all the potential members. In that next step, we would draft MOUs between the RWA, and our recommendation is that RiverCog serve it as the RWA to start, and each municipality that is eventually interested in joining the RWA. And then we would also draft ordinances and resolutions to be able to carry out that framework. We won't be asking you to join the authority on June 24th. What we'll be asking you for is your interest in continuing the conversation. So at this point, we're open to questions either now or between now and in early June when we're preparing the final report and the final presentation for you all on the 24th. And then we'll also be issuing a final version of the existing conditions report and some town profiles that we've been working on that really give each of you a snapshot of what you're doing and be able to look at what other towns are doing as well, that you might be able to learn from or take advantage of or share resources with. So that's the end of our presentation. Janice, do you want to open it up to questions? And I think I'll look to you to guide the administration of those.
Right. Yeah, please, anybody have any questions? Todd, you had something earlier that you were going to ask?
Yes. Um, actually, I have a lot of questions. First of all, the town of East Haddam, I'm sure, is looking for the lowest cost of waste management and disposal. Lowest cost and the highest reliability. It's kind of tedious thinking about what you're going to do every 2 or 3 years with new contractors of what they're going to do for us, what they're not going to do for us. Things are changing rapidly, and I'm a firm believer in keeping things simple. We need the simplest system. So I'm going to ask for this question: what is the destination of our waste? I know Kristen just explain the various types of waste. I have that same question. What's our destination? I suspect the ultimate destination of our waste is the same for everybody. And I'll give you an example why, and thinking about that, that drives our cost. I'm also worried about reliability. I tore down a building at my place, no, 10 years ago, I forgot now, it's been a while. And I hired a company I tore it down, tore the building down, but I had a company take away the waste, the concrete, the wood, the scrap, all that stuff. So I asked my supplier, where's my concrete and wood going? And his answer shocked me. Ohio. It's all going to Ohio. And I'm getting feedback now, of course, I don't know everything, that Ohio doesn't want to do this anymore. And they may turn us off. And I think Pennsylvania was doing the same thing and they're having second thoughts about it. So we need a big picture here. What's our long-term goal? And that's what I hope we don't lose sight of that, because I myself and my successors as first selectmen and boards of selectmen, they don't want to be worried about what they're going to do with the waste. We got to have a bigger, better plan. But for the short term, I'm inclined for the big regional system, the full authority that on the right-hand side of the screen that Chris is talking about, because I think that's going to give us the lowest cost. Right now, cost is a big deal for every town and also across the country. So I want something that's going to be the lowest cost. I want something that's going to be the highest reliability. I don't have to answer to about a dozen different entities of what I can do with the waste. I want nice and simple, and for all aspects. And I think that the customers, the citizens of my town want the same thing. And we hear like people are fairly well trained here in East Haddam to sort their waste. Bottles and paper go in one stream. But then we're hearing it's called single stream. But then I'm hearing that single stream stuff, a lot of it doesn't even get recycled. It goes and it gets burned or buried. And so that doesn't sound very reliable to me. That sounds like a system that cannot continue. So I need some numbers though. What are the cost sources and drivers for waste? All types of waste. How much does that cost? And what is it costing us in East Haddam versus somebody in Colchester or Essex? And how can regionalization lower that cost? As I explained at our last meeting thank you very much for the workshops. As I explained in the workshops, we gotta be careful about all this because I think a big driver to cost is transportation, which means distance. And we should be hauling our stuff. Since a lot of the stuff has the same destination, I suspect, I don't know that, but I suspect that. I think we need to look at the lowest possible cost for transportation. And as you folks probably know, the haul by truck cost X, but the haul by rail is 1/10 of X. And given the price of energy is not going to be going down, I think that's something we really should consider as we regionalize. I guess I'm trying to tell you, I'm leaning toward regionalization in a big way. I think that's the way to really go. So I'll back up, I'll stop here talking. What are, as you folks, Kristen, your RRS company, do they know what the cost drivers are for the current waste systems that we have in our area?
We do, yeah, and the costs that you're experiencing in Connecticut are very common across the country, and you're absolutely right. The cost of disposal is actually a fraction of the total cost of of disposing of waste collectively. The transportation is always the largest driver of the cost. So if you can minimize the distance that it needs to go, then the cost becomes less of a significant component of the total cost of disposing of that item or that type of waste. Absolutely. I've heard, yeah, so I'm in Michigan. Some of the haulers have told us here in Michigan that the cost of transportation is 70% of the cost of disposal. And the actual tipping fee, the fee that's charged at the disposal site, would be the remainder. So, a quarter-ish of the total is the disposal.
So
And
therefore,
I just,
if we want to regionalize in Connecticut or anywhere, we got to think about what we need to do is to minimize that transportation piece,
Right.
either by location or by method of transportation or both.
Yeah.
Thank you.
and
Thank
I'll
you.
just, and I'll just want to follow up on Todd's questions, is that right now, the creation of a regional waste authority is really about keeping options open. It's not precluding towns from going on their own if if they have a better deal, but it's about creating a structure to keep everyone together, and to have an entity that, if useful to the towns, can be used. That's the direction we received from Deep. That's the funding we received from Deep, and there's really no risk to the towns here in proceeding with this. In that we can create the regional waste authority, and it could be used in the future to negotiate contracts on behalf of the towns, but it doesn't, there's no requirement that it does have to be used. But it is a legal structure that can make decisions, that can charge dues, that can do contracting, and that simplifies the situation we are in, particularly for situation with the former Mira facility in Essex, where it's all sort of individual towns agreeing to work with the town of Essex. You could have something where you could have a regional waste authority for our region with its member towns, then deciding to work with a different waste authority and say, okay, we're gonna negotiate a contract with SCARA for disposal, and it could be negotiated as a unit. I do think volume has a role as well in price, and the more volume you can control, the more leverage you may have. Although Kristen might be more the expert on that, the role that volume plays in price negotiations. But I think long term, if we want to talk about price, it's going to be about volume to be able to have leverage.
And these are all decisions that would be part of what an authority could do. That's what could be part of joining together.
And I think what's also interesting in talking, let's say just talking to SCARA, if we wanted to work with them, they don't have capacity to take on new towns until they negotiate their next round of contracts, which isn't really until 2030. So we have the short-term issues, particularly for the former Essex Mirror facility towns, as to what they're going to do. And that short term, and I think every town is sort of has the short term about what we're doing for the rest of this decade, because it's really, it's from the sounds of it, these contracts are long term. And that if we're going to have a structure to sort of negotiate something on the behalf of a regional, 17 towns working together, that's going to be has to be a longer term goal. Though you could imagine that a RWA could work on new things, let's say new product stewardship projects. Let's say there's a new product stewardship requirement for a certain commodity or a consumer item that is not being provided for at transfer stations. That could be potentially those types of things, or dealing with organics, or as Kristen talked about, equipment. Trying to find uses for an RWA that are sort of additive, as opposed to the core of solid waste and recycling in the short term.
Any other questions?
Go ahead.
Oh. You go ahead, please.
Okay, following what Sam just said, is that why SCARA is not taking in new members because they're contract limited at this point?
That is, well, that's one of the issues. The other issue is they would have to agree to take us on, which is not a given. But I think the more basic one is they have a contract for disposal that's been negotiated for volume for the towns that are currently part of SCARA. So I don't think they have any capacity for new towns to join.
That's unfortunate because they're on my side of the river, our side of the
Yeah.
river. And to go down, I appreciate your operation, but I have to cross, our people have to cross the bridge.
Yeah.
And if
Well, at least the bridge is in better shape than it used to be.
it is, we want to keep it that way too, but so that's why it makes sense for me for us to go next door to Colchester for hazardous waste rather than going down to Essex or Chester or some other place. So that's
True.
another factor, and that's customer satisfaction, basically. If it's not easy to get rid of, they won't get rid of it, or they'll do something else with it, which we don't want. So that's another consideration. Geography has a lot to do here, and geography and geology has a lot to do with how we form our regions, is I guess what I'm trying to say. And
Yeah.
and that part is definitely not simple. So I understand what you're saying, but I have in my heart, my gut, I got a strong feeling that we need a bigger overall system plan here that is going to really make sense. And well, first of all, I'm fully in favor of regionalization. I think that's the way to go. I have no doubt about that whatsoever. That's an easy sell for me and for my town. But I also want a bigger region to think about transportation. And for example, we've got an old railway line right down the river just across unfortunately, it is across the river in Haddam, but it is a railroad, and I know, fuel's not gonna get any cheaper. BTUs, energy is not gonna get any cheaper. So we gotta think about the lowest cost at some point here, other than what we're doing now. But I'm fully in favor of regionalization, there's no question about it. I don't think there's any other way to go, frankly.
Thanks, Todd, for your comments. Does anyone else have, looking at the clock, we have just 2 minutes left. So is anyone else want to sort of share their thoughts or strong support or strong dissent about the direction that we're going, just so that we can keep that in mind or potentially follow up with you as we keep advancing the project and the final report and recommendation?
I'll just say, I think that the authority direction is the most logical one for all the reasons Todd laid out, for all the reasons you laid out. This might be a question more for Sam. How much money is available for the establishment of an authority?
So there's $250,000 for the startup cost for the authority, and then there's additional money for the legal work to hire an attorney to help set up the legal documents, the ordinances that probably would have to be adopted by the municipalities, and that work. And then I think there might be some additional money for the consultant.
It's rolling.
Yeah, for the consultant and for the Rivercog staff time, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was just wondering if there was also money
But
for
it's a significant amount. I talked to Norm about this. He had some ideas of, if all that money wasn't needed or used, how it could potentially be put to use. And from the experience of other COGs, so West COG in the southwestern part of the state, they did a study where their result of their study was they don't want to create another regional entity. Why can't the COG just do this? And under different statutes in a different chapter of the general statutes, COGs are enabled to work in solid waste and recycling. And so they use the argument the COGs are already enabled by statute to work in this area. Why do we have to create an RWA? And Deep said, well, we gave you the money to create this thing. And if you're not going to create this thing, we want our money back. I thought they had a legitimate argument based on a different part of the statutes. The difference between a COG and an RWA, though, which actually RWA is not in the statutes. It would be a resource recovery authority. That's the legal name in the statutes. And that authority can do bonding and can also use eminent domain. Those are the main differences between and COGs are not allowed to do that. COGs can't bond and they can't use eminent domain.
Well, you're not governments.
What?
You're not governments. Of course you can't.
Right. But our members can. Our members can do it, of course. But anyway, I don't know how essential that really is because I don't know. I don't see a future RWA created in this way using eminent domain, and also I don't quite understand how the bonding works because would they be bonding on the full faith and credit of the member towns?
Right.
Or in the state. So I'm curious who would lend to a brand new RWA.
I would imagine it on that bonding question, just being a member of a regional school district, it would be based on the credit of the towns, though it gets a little hinky because they technically have their own bond rating, but it's a mess.
That's the real issue here. But it seemed like a Deep, at least in that case with Westcog, dug in their heels and said, no, if you're not doing it the way we were interested in you doing it, we're taking our money back. So,
which runs counter to the goal of the whole thing. But hey, that's Deep for it.
Oh, and I fully understand the first selectmen and mayors down in that part of the state not wanting to create yet another regional entity. At least for the temporary short term, I would imagine that if we did create something, it would be housed at Rivercog and would probably just be a business item at the regular COG meeting, or something that would be, or maybe separately, but we were brainstorming of in the interim before it could actually do any real waste negotiations or be an entity that actually could have contracts, what could it do? And the household hazardous waste program is an obvious one that could be we could populate into it. But yeah, no, I think I'm sort of I'm interested in proceeding, seeing what questions might arise. Some questions that just off the top of my head is okay, so we create an RWA. Well, what kind of insurance does it need, and those types of questions. But those types of liability issues, how would this all work with management, and what are the best practices for setting up bylaws and structures and stuff.
So thanks everybody for attending today, for the questions and the conversation. We'll make sure, as it was noted in the chat, we'll make sure that the slides get sent out to you, and also the recording of this meeting gets posted on the RiverCog website. So it's there for you to refer back to or share with colleagues and folks in your departments that would be curious and that you'd want to know about. So please I think Janice is our point of contact. So if you can fill out that form if on the website or contact Janice directly, if you have her email address directly, let her know if you have support or any concerns that we can address between now and the early part of June, as we intend to wrap up the report and prepare for the presentation at the COG meeting on the 24th. Anything else, Janice or Sam or Megan?
No, as Kristen said, I can send out a note to everybody saying where to connect on the website to get this information. Thanks for your time for joining today and learning about it, and we'll keep rolling. Keep taking steps forward. So thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.